Want to bring in now Dan Perry. He is the Associated Press's former chief editor for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Dan, your thoughts on what Volker had to say there a moment ago, especially when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and even the relationships more broadly the Trump administration is potentially harming.
Look, it should have been clear to anyone listening to Trump on the campaign trail that there would be more or less an abandonment of the blanket commitment to support Ukraine in what looks like a war that could last many more years. And therefore, in all likelihood, it is going to a place where the U.S. is going to pressure Ukraine to more or less agree to freeze the current lines on the battlefield and essentially cede about 15% of its territory to Russia. Whether that is enough for Putin is an open question. Whether the critics who say that doing that will only whet Putin's appetite and encourage him to A, attack Ukraine again a few years down the line, and B, go after other countries that are currently more or less aligned with the West, like Moldova and the Baltics, which are NATO members, and perhaps even Romania and so forth, these are legitimate questions. But it kind of looks like, in the grander scheme of things, Trump and his team are abandoning about 80 years worth of U.S. leadership in a global geopolitical structure that has largely kept the peace in Europe and beyond. I mean, presidents, Democratic and Republican, have been very committed to NATO and to the idea that the U.S. is a guarantor of security on the continent vis-a-vis Russia. Trump appears to be abandoning this.
Dan, to your point there a moment ago, you were saying the Trump administration is going to pressure Zelensky to kind of reach an agreement here. Do you think they really can? I mean, Zelensky has come out and essentially said that he's not going to stand for anything like this. He's not going to stand certainly for a deal done behind his back. Is there any leverage that he has, potentially to continue this war, to your point, many years from now, if in fact the U.S. doesn't continue to back it?
The idea was that Zelensky can somehow outlast the Russians and that the Russian economy, but also Russian order of battle, the soldiers, are going to run out at some point. They need money for this. And we're talking about well over $100 billion. In fact, about $200 billion, the U.S. plus the Europeans. The major question is whether the Europeans are going to step up and make up the deficit if the U.S. walks away. And it's more than just money and weaponry. We're talking about momentum in diplomacy. And for the U.S. to walk away from Ukraine will probably, in my assessment, force Zelensky to be more acquiescent. And again, it's very dangerous because appeasing a dictator that attacked you and giving them a partial victory in the form of territory is rarely in history a good idea. But that seems to be where this is headed.
Dan, I'm going to have to leave it there, but to your point, it potentially undoes decades of work. Dan Perry, Associated Press's former chief editor for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East.